Hey, Sivan here, welcome to this video. In this one we're going to be looking at the different types of curve tools and some of the different ways to make curves. So what we're going to look at is under Create, we've got curve tools. I'm going to pull this off because I'm going to use a lot of the different tools inside here. Basically what we can do is use curves as a starting point for different geometry or different shapes, and we can use it with deformers as well. But what we're going to look at in this video is just the different types of curves and some of the ways of making curves. So inside the curve tool, so create curve tools, I've pulled it off. Depending on which version you're using, there may not be all of these, but we're going to kind of quickly go through them in this video and sort of talk about the different ways in which they each work. So the first one that everyone pretty much comes into contact with first is CV curve. It stands for control vertex, and what we want to normally do is when we create a curve, we don't normally want to make it in perspective. The problem is if we make it in perspective, we don't actually know where it is placed in the X, Y and Z, and what we normally want to start with is a flat curve which we can then sort of move around and place. So what we normally want to do is make a curve in one of our orthographic views. So I'm going to start with the CV curve. We're going to look at a few of the settings inside it. So I've clicked on the little square. If you haven't done that, just click on the tool once and then double click on the tool on the left. That will open the tool settings, or the icon here opens and closes the tool settings. Right, by default the tool will be set to things like 3 cubic, uniform and multiple end knots. These are similar in pretty much all of the tools, so I'll kind of go through them properly once and then we'll skim over them in the other tools. So first thing is curve degree. What this kind of affects is how many points you need to start making a curve. So 1 linear and 2 are normally very rigid points. So I've set it to 1 linear. If I then start clicking, that is basically my curve. I hit enter to confirm it, it will look like that. Every point is a corner. By default, it's generally on something like 3 cubic. And what that means is I need to place 4 points before I can start to see a corner. And what it will do is it will smooth between 3 points at a time. So basically 3 points make a corner. So if I wanted it close, so to get rid of a point, you just hit the backspace. So if I wanted a corner, I would need 3 points very close together. The further I spread them apart, the smoother the corner will be. So that's the general curve degree. The higher the number, the more points you need before you start to get a curve. So the other key option in here is multiple end knots. So when we create a curve currently, it will start from our first point and end at our last point. If we change this to multiple end knots off, when we place it, the curve doesn't start from the first and last, it will stop before, but these points will be able to change the aim, so where the kind of end of the curve is aiming. So it depends on what you're kind of doing. You might want to have a bit more control over the aim. So I'm going to reset my tool. So this is a standard sort of tool. What we're going to look at next is a slight variant of it. From what I've seen, not everyone knows the difference between a CV and an EP, and they're not sure what situations they should use which. Personally, I tend to use CV curve a lot because I have more control with 3-point corners and things sort of along those lines. But the big difference, so you've got kind of the exact same settings in here, you just don't have the multiple knot ends. But the big difference is when I make a CV curve, a 3-point, it smooths between the 3 points. So this brown red line around the outside is where I've placed my points. That's the joins between them, and then there's a curve that kind of is smooth between them. If I do this with the EP curve, the points look slightly different, but also the big difference is the curve actually goes through my points, but they're still smooth. So you have kind of more control over where the curve actually goes. The only problem with this is if you try and do a 3-point corner, because it's smoothing automatically for you, you get things like this. So it's trying to smooth the 3 points as much as possible, and you end up with kind of a knot. So there are ways to fix that, but it's kind of one thing you have to be careful with. So that's the big difference between CV curve and EP curve. EP stands for edit point on each of them. So that's a CV and an EP. Right, the next one on here is a Bezier curve. There's no real options inside here. There's just kind of how you manipulate it, but it works in the exact same way every Bezier works. There are some sort of tools over here for you to use, but it works on the sort of left click drag to set your Bezier angle, and then you kind of just work through it that way. The exact same way as the other tools, it's just you have the Bezier control inside this curve as well. You've then got pencil curve, so you kind of free draw and then it will turn it into a curve. So you'll have this uneven sort of surface where it's adding all of these points. So what this will look like, so if I go into the control vertex for this, there'll be lots and lots of points placed across the whole thing, whereas if I was to do this with a CV curve, so it's basically following the exact same shape, but the difference is it's very smooth in the way it does it, and that's because I only have control vertexes where I chose to place them, whereas with the pencil it's placed them every single time that I have drawn it or it's changed angle in the slightest. So you'll end up, if you use this for a revolve or something like that, it would be very high poly and you would need to kind of fix it after. So they're the two kind of differences. It's good to kind of start with, but then you'd need to go in after and probably tidy it up. So by selecting some of the control points and deleting them. After you've made it, it works in the same way as a 3-point CV curve. So you can always go through and delete the point so it smooths out like your CV curve. So you can get a similar result just by tidying it up after. So it's kind of another option when creating a curve. Right, the last two on here are 3-point circular arc and 2-point circular arc. So for this one, you make 3 points and then you control the kind of axes. So you move around how much of an arc you want, and then hit enter, and then it will remove the control handles and place the arc based on your 3 points. 2 points works the exact same way, it's just this time you just have 2 points and you move them based on that. So you don't have as much control, but it works in the exact same way that you place just 2 points instead. Right, so I'm just going to make a CV curve, and then we're going to talk about just a few of the editing tools to edit your curve. So I've just placed a curve here. Once you've hit enter and confirmed it, it will go green and your curve is kind of complete. If you hold down right click and go control vertex, these purple dots are the points that you place. Obviously if you've done an EP curve, the points will be actually on the line. So this is a CV curve, and what I can then do is I can move them around however I want. There are a few options that we can then do. So under curves in 16, I'm not going to go through all of these, just a kind of a few of the main ones. The rest are kind of up to you to experiment with. But you've got like lock length and unlock length. So if I lock the length and then pull this one here, it will move the other points to keep this curve the same length. It will still change shape, but it will remain the same length no matter what. And then you can obviously unlock it as well. Other options in here are add points tool. So I completed the curve, I ended it, but I can go back in now and add new points and hit enter. So if I ended the curve too short, then I can go back in and add more points to it after. Also got insert knot. So this one, what we need to do is hold down right click, and this time rather than going to control vertex, we want to go to curve point. Curve point, we can place them wherever we want on our curve. It's just a point on our curve. So I'm just going to click here, and then I'm going to go into curves, and I'm going to first let's look at edit curve tool. So I've selected a curve point, and then I've gone edit curve tool. What happens is I get this control handle. What I can then do is, it's fairly similar to the Bezier controls. I can drag the tools around, I can change the shape of the curve wherever I want, based purely on the curve point. So this one isn't working on the CV points, it's working on the actual points themselves on the curve. So I can use this to also lock or flip in different directions. Right, so that's the general kind of curve tools. Other things we can do is we can create an object. So I'm just going to create a polygon sphere. What we can do is we can extract curves from objects. So say I wanted just a circle from here. Generally there wouldn't be much point in kind of extracting this. You'd normally do it on something like a little bit more complex. So it'd be a piece of geometry you've already made, or something I sometimes use it on is a helix. So if I just, so you can see. So what I can do is I can select an edge. So I double click an edge going all the way around the object. I can go to modify, convert, polygon edges to curve. There are settings in here that will change whether it's a 3 Bezier or a 1 linear, depending on what you want. Generally the default settings pretty much work for what you want. So all I'm going to do is just click this, and what happens is we then get a curve. So like I said, if it's a piece of geometry you've already made, you can then build a new piece of geometry from the curves you've extracted, or you can start with something like a helix curve and then move it how you want. Some objects will be very high CVs, so it's up to you to kind of edit the settings and get what you want. In the next videos, we're going to look at how to actually use these curves to make different geometries. It'll probably go over a couple of videos looking at different surface tools and extrude as well. See you there.